The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Arcane Wonders, game toppers, realizing it's already September, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy of the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Watergate by Capstone Games. Then they'll take a look back at their reviews of Istanbul, the dice game, and Montana in their Dukes quadruple take. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And this is episode 208, which we're calling I Am Not a Turk.
That's pretty good. That was good Nixon.
Yeah, it's
good
solid. Nixon. So we named that episode thanks to our buddy Jimmy DM90. Of course, we're talking about Watergate and Richard Nixon and his famous I Am Not a Crook. And then Istanbul is a game about city in Turkey. So, hey, look at that. All works out pretty well.
Yeah, and we name all of those episodes with the help of our Board Game Geek Guild number 2008. I took your thunder there, Sean.
That's
you left
okay.
it right there, and then I stole it. I stole that thunder.
You're all about the thunder. There was a lot of thunder-related talk before we started recording, but that's okay.
So much thunder talk, mostly about the Oklahoma City Thunder, now trying to move on without Russell Westbrook for the first time in many, many seasons. It looks like a team that's falling apart, quite frankly, Sean.
Great. That means I get to talk about Magic real quick.
Oh, great. Oh, you beat me to it. Dang it.
First mention. Yes. So I got to play some of the new Magic the Gathering Commander 2019 decks, and they're pretty sweet. And when we're done recording here, Alex, I'm going to go play some Magic Arena because there's preview for the next set, Throne of Eldraine. You can get Brawl decks up until September 9th. Actually, I think by the time this airs, that availability is going to be gone. But Throne of Eldraine will be available at the end of the month anyway. So that's what you get, Alex. Talk about sports. I'm talking about Magic.
All right. Well, seems fair. I could talk about sports-related games like Baseball Highlights 2045, first mention of that specific game.
And by the way, what we were also talking about, specifically about Stealing Thunder, is for years and years, you have been the world's largest, greatest, because it's not a size thing, greatest.
I don't know about largest.
Evangelist for Baseball Highlights 2045. And I don't know that you are anymore.
Look, you lose 2 World Series, or you see someone win 2 World Series titles back to back. Your fans are getting restless. People are counting you out, aren't believing in you anymore, and you start to doubt yourself, Sean. And Philip Millman has made me start to doubt myself. He is spreading the gospel far and wide.
Yeah, so because he was on the Dice Tower Con episode, right?
Yes.
At the end of the episode, right?
Yep.
And it was interesting because I had no idea then that he would usurp you as the biggest evangelist, but he's been all over the various Facebook groups posting pictures of the trophy on tour.
Yeah, I mean, my team is, I'm trying to think of a good sports analogy for this team, because this is a team that's never actually won, but had a pretty decent fan base, but now the fans are just starting to kind of climb off the band. Maybe the Knicks. I'm the New York Knicks. I'm the New York Knicks of Baseball Highlights 2045, which is mixing so many metaphors it's not even funny.
Okay.
Anyway.
But that means I get to say something else about Magic. My favorite of the Commander decks is the Savine Commander deck, which is the red, white, blue Commander deck because it has a bunch of flashback shenanigans. Anyway.
Oh, it's not because of America?
No.
You commie.
Okay. So Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine. This is, we were recording this the day before my final day at Gray Fox Games.
Oh my.
Yeah, the time will be up by the time this episode is out. And there was a request on the Guild, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
There was a request that I reveal my true thoughts and feelings on Gray Fox Games related titles.
Okay.
Through a series of quick ratings.
All right.
So I'm going to do that for the ones that immediately come to mind. Are you prepared?
Let's hear it.
Deception, Murder in Hong Kong.
Well,
a 5 or a 6.
You're gonna give it a 6.
I just said it's a 5 or a 6. I don't know which of the two it is.
I thought you were asking, is there going to be a 5 or a 6?
It's probably a 6. That game is amazing.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think you're on the you're on the same page with that one.
I give it a 6 too.
Okay. Champions of Midgard, probably a 4 without the expansion and a 5 with Valhalla.
Okay.
Have you tried it with Valhalla yet?
I still haven't. I really need to. But I mean, I'd put it in the 4 or 5 category. And from what I've heard, I'm sure Valhalla will help that quite a bit.
Bushido, a straight up 6. It's Baseball Highlights 2045 with Samurai. That is a quintessential Alex game.
Played it a couple weeks ago at Empire. I would give it. I'd give it a pretty high-ish rating. Well, like 4, probably 4 or 5.
That's
probably
solid.
4.
I'll take a.
I think it's pretty good.
There's one from the back catalog, 7 Ronin, which is a strong 5. That game is really good. I don't know if you've tried that one yet, Sean.
Yeah, that's the one with the different sectors of a village.
Yeah, and one of you is the Ronin and one of you are the ninja, and you're kind of trying to guess what they're going to do.
It's pretty good. Now I feel like we're just shilling for Grey Fox.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. There's no longer a conflict of interest here.
Do you have points on the back end? Is that why we're doing this?
No, I don't have points on the back end. Come on. Reavers of Midgard, the yet to be released title. That's probably a 4. I'd give that one a 4.
Okay.
High 4 maybe. City of Gears, probably more like a 3. Yeah. It has some really decently interesting things going on. Anything else? I'm trying to think of something else. Harvest Dice, solid 4. I like Harvest Dice a good amount. That's
that's
a fun
decent
roll
right
game. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's a few of them for right now. I'm sure some folks will ask me to rattle off more later, or maybe not. Who knows? But yeah, I'm nothing officially locked down on the next steps just yet. Having a couple of meetings in the coming days and weeks, and it's fine. It's all fine. I'm feeling good. I appreciate the support, folks reaching out and wishing me the best in the future endeavors. And again, I don't know what those are yet because I'm really good at leaving stuff without a new plan. So that's how I'm doing. You said you had a bad day earlier when we were talking, Sean.
Yeah, so we completed the move. We moved the office over the weekend. The movers showed up 3 hours late. So we finished the move Friday night at like 11 p.m. And then other stuff during Saturday. And all this week, I mean, we were closed Friday for the move. And then it was Monday off for Labor Day here in the U.S. And so I was kind of behind work-wise. And then as you move into a new place and you have this new business, there's all of these things that you did not plan for. So like, hey, I changed the Facebook address, like the physical address on Facebook, and I changed it on our website, but I forgot to change it on our invoices. So we sent out all of the invoices with our old address. Okay, whatever. And then we show up and I realize, oh my goodness, I didn't call our sign guy to put signs on our new door and window inside this office building. So I had to go print up something at Kinko's real quick. It's not Kinko's, FedEx office, sponsor of the show, good friends.
Yeah. Thanks, FedEx Kinko's.
So we've got this nice poster that's just kind of temporary on the outside of the door, and our sign guy is coming out early next week. And so just, little stuff like that that's just popping up all week. And today it just finally came to a head when I just was grumpy with everyone. But yeah, and besides that though, we're settling in. Everything's fine, just like you said, Alex. Also on the weight loss front, still doing solid. I'm at 33.5 pounds down. I'm at 181.8 or 6 or something like that as of this morning. So I should be cracking into the 270s pretty soon here, which is pretty good. I will say my suits, I couldn't really button them for a while.
That's not great.
I'd go into court with my suits just kind of flapping about, but I can finally button them now, so that's good. And
that's a very good sign. Yeah, nice.
And I have several pairs of jeans and other pants that I had to kind of not get rid of, but stop using because they were just a little too big, too baggy. And so I've moved into some better sizes. So that's how that's going well. And as soon as we're done here, Alex, I have to play Magic, but I need to make dinner. It's going to be a delicious Caesar salad with some flank steak. It's gonna be
nice.
Good.
Sounds healthy and full of protein.
Oh yeah, lots of protein. So yeah, that's about how I'm doing. But Alex, we have some interesting games to talk about. Should we talk about them
yes.
on this board game podcast about board games?
This our podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Yeah, kick us off, Sean. What have you been playing?
So I got to play City of the Big Shoulders, which is a really, really interesting game. Alex, while I'm talking about it, can you help me out? Because I'm a little scatterbrained, and tell me the designer and the publisher, because I forgot to.
I will look those up.
Put that in the show notes. So this got billed as kind of an 18xx light. It has the stock market from an 18xx, and you're conducting runs of companies. Your companies are manning the factories, and you're producing goods to sell at the market. But there's no route building like in an 18xx game. And also a little bit like a lighter Arkwright, which is a 6 for me. I love Arkwright. And 18xx is the ones that I've played would be like high 5, possibly 6, depending on the couple that we've played. Really enjoy Arkwright, really enjoy 18xx. And so this was something that I was very intrigued about. And we played this twice now in the last week. Both times at 3 players. No, we did 3 in a 4-player game. And it's good. It's a good game, but it has some issues. So basically the idea is that you are floating companies. You are taking an initial amount of money that you start with, and then you are purchasing stock in a particular company. You're starting up this business, and there are 10 shares that you're going to be issuing throughout the game. When you float the business, you have to buy the first initial 3 shares, and then you set the par value of the stock. So if I want to say it's going to be $40 a share, then I have to spend $120, which I put into that company's treasury, and I'm going to use that money to benefit the company throughout the game, buying workers, salespeople, managers, and different resources to run the factories to produce goods that I'm eventually going to sell to make a bunch of money. And I then take that money and I pay it out to the shareholders and also back into the company to keep doing that, basically. So it's this economic game that, like, for a long time I was not a fan of economic games, and now more and more I'm really enjoying economic games. It's good, but it's kind of weird. The rulebook is really bad. It is a really bad rulebook. There are a lot of questionable choices as far as the way certain things are printed on the board. So, for example, as your stock value goes up, visually it goes downwards on the board. That doesn't make a lot of sense. There are things on the board that aren't in the rulebook, and they're there more for 18xx players to remind them of, hey, here are some things that you're accustomed to in an 18xx game, but we don't actually have that in this game. But it doesn't mention that in the rulebook, because apparently the rulebook was written by a bunch of 18xx gamers.
Oh, okay.
So I get it, but it's just kind of confusing. What I will say is this scratched the same itch I get when playing an 18xx or say an Arkwright game. There's an intro to 18xx called Poseidon, which I talked about in the podcast maybe a year and a half ago. And both Matt Walker and I got it near about the same time, and we were excited for it because we're like, hey, a quick 2-hour 18xx game. Normally they're like 5-6 hours. That sounds fantastic. But it didn't quite scratch that 18xx itch. And this did. But there's some other weird stuff too, like with the gameplay. So one of the really compelling things in 18xx is your company continues to need more and more money because you're buying trains, which are the more connections you make, the more cities you're able to connect, the more money you make. But eventually certain models of trains rust. They are no longer of value to you. They go away, and you have to always have more and more money for new trains. In this game, at a certain point, you don't really need much more money for the company. In fact, it would happen quite a bit where your companies had tons of money left in them, and money in the company doesn't really do much good for you because the way you win the game is by having the most cash on hand plus the value of your stock portfolio. Plus there are some end game bonuses and things like that. And while there are other ways to get money out of your company, like there are certain worker placement spots that you can go to pay additional dividends, it's still kind of weird. There wasn't any of that pressure of, oh my goodness, all of these things that I've acquired are going to go away. Once you acquire these things, with the exception of the resources, you've got them for the rest of the game, and your company is just always going to be better than a new company that's starting up, because there's also this appeal track, which is the priority for for selling things. So that was a little weird. What I do like about this game is, making the Arkwright comparison, man, the action selection in Arkwright is really opaque. Like, it's really difficult to teach. You have to spend a certain amount of money to take a certain action, but the way that you spend the money affects this action differently than this other action. And it's just really hard for a lot of people to grok at first. Here, it's a pretty simple worker placement mechanism. So there are a lot of things to like about this game, and it is in some ways potentially a contender for Game of the Year. So both this and Pipeline, I'm just gaga for, but I don't know what kind of staying capacity this has. Like right now, I think Pipeline's probably going to have more staying capacity. What this is really making me want to do is go back and play Arkwright again, because I haven't played Arkwright in at least a year and a half. I love Arkwright. I really need to play that again. It's really good, but there's just some weird... This game's got some really rough edges. Really, really rough edges. And I'm curious to see what you would think about it. I think there are things about this game you would like, and I think you hear Arkwright and you're instantly scared off.
Yeah, it's an immediate turnoff. No way.
But I think it's much more accessible than Arkwright. And it's a really interesting and in some ways forgiving economic game. It's not a super mean economic game like Arkwright and especially a lot of 18xx games can be. Did I ever tell you about my biggest table flip in an 18xx game? Actually, probably my biggest table flip ever.
You did not.
We were playing 1830, and I just constantly kept getting cut off from the next stock that I needed, or cut off from the one tile that I needed. And I was the banker, and I was just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm not going to be the banker. You guys, you figure out the chips, you figure out the math. I'm done. And to this day, Rory always laughs about it, because it's the one time he's seen me like not quite rage quit, but the equivalent of politely rage quitting.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound that polite.
Well, I still played. I still sat through for another 2 hours while everyone else finished, and I did terribly.
Yeah, the appeal of this game is exactly 0 for me.
Okay.
Exactly, like maybe even negative appeal.
Huh.
If that's a thing. Its weight rating about a 3.8, which is on the heftier side of things.
Yeah.
Worth. By the way, designed by Raymond Chandler III, published by Parallel Games and Quined Games or Queened Games.
Quinted Games.
Quinted Games.
So it's Quinted Games over in Europe, and it has a different title in Europe, which is weird. I can't remember what it's called in Europe. I think it's called like something Chicago
1875, City of the Big Shoulders.
There you go.
Yep.
That's kind of weird that it has different names. By the way, if you want to watch a fantastic video review of this game, you should check out Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules. He is pretty brutal to this game, and it's pretty fun to watch. Oh, and he's working on a new rulebook for it. I guess they hired him to redo the rulebook.
I mean, that's one way to get work, right? You tear apart a rulebook, and then they're like, all right, well, do better. And he's like, I will, because he's Paul Grogan. Yeah. So, yeah. No interest in this game, Sean, but I will say our listeners do have interest in this, because I posted a thread asking for review suggestions, and this was one of the more commonly mentioned ones.
Sure.
So, and I will say this, BGG loves this game. It's got an 8.2 average on 320 ratings, which is pretty dang solid.
Yeah. So that is City of the Big Shoulders.
City of the Big Shoulders. City of the I'm not interested for me. All right. Next one I'm going to talk about is one that has absolutely dominated conversation this week, because, hey, I can finally talk about Tapestry, the newest game from Stonemaier Games and the newest Jamie Stegmaier design. For folks not familiar, Jamie Stegmaier has designed games in the past like Euphoria, Viticulture, Scythe, Charterstone. Tapestry is a civilization game, and Sean, this is a game with a 4-page rulebook. Just 4 pages. There are little extra reference guides, but the actual rules of the game are just 4 pages. That's because, fundamentally, it's fairly simple. On your turn, you are either going to move up on one of the tracks, paying the necessary resource, up on the science track, the technology track, the military track, or the exploration track, or you're going to take income. Basically, take kind of a rest or set up the next era of your civilization that you're building. When you take income, you're going to possibly get a civilization-based ability. You're going to play a new, what's called Tapestry card, which might be things like dictatorship. They can be effects that will last for the rest of the next era. They can be one-time effects. It just depends. That's so you'll play those cards. You will advance your one of your science cards if you have any, and then get victory points based on what you have uncovered, and then get resources. This plays up to 5 players. I've played it twice. I've played it with 5 and with 4, and worth discussing on a couple fronts here. One, I don't want to go too deep into this game because we're going to be doing a full review. Sean has a copy on the way, so we will be talking about this one in more depth in future episodes. But also, just worth noting, I play in Jamie's game group on an almost weekly basis. I know Jamie. I like Jamie. I consider him a friend. So take anything I say opinion-wise about this game with a grain of salt. So I will tell you this, Sean. I'm really, really curious how you're going to like this one, because on its surface, any Civ game is typically more of a Sean game than an Alex game.
Sure.
And because you've enjoyed games like Through the Ages, Nations, those types of games in the past. And I've heard I need to try Through the Ages on an iPad or something along those lines, but have yet to do it. And those are games with pretty beefy learning curves.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you I could learn them, but it's not the type of game I'm typically attracted to. What sets Tapestry apart and makes it really interesting is not just the very simple structure with a lot of depth baked into the game. It's a couple of other things. One is the different civilization powers. There are 16 different civilizations, I believe, in the box. You draw 2 at the start of the game and then pick 1 to keep. And those civilizations can do anything from advancing you far on tracks to start the game, or setting up situations where between each era, when you're taking income turns, you get one-time bonuses, or even other wackier things like the isolationists who can claim extra territory and make it uninvadable effectively. So there's good variety there. The other thing, too, though, is the game doesn't have a set typical ending in the way that most games do. The way this game ends is when you personally have taken your 5th income turn, your score is locked in. Your score is done, and you're done playing. But everyone else who still has turns to take in this game will continue playing past that point, basically until they've spent all their resources and decided to take their 5th and final income turn. What that's meant is, in both the 4-player and the 5-player game, there was one player who finished their game 20 to 30 minutes before everyone else, which is the first time I think I've ever seen that in a game that doesn't have outright player elimination, right? This isn't player elimination. This is just, you're done, here's your score. This isn't, you've been assassinated, you've been killed off, you're done, you can't contribute to this game anymore because you're dead. It's something different altogether. And I'm really curious how that facet of the game is going to be received.
Yeah.
I don't know how fully to talk about this game. There are some component things to this that are absolutely mind-blowing and over the top, and Jamie certainly went all out with the production on this game. There are some things that I think folks are going to find a little weird. There's a sandpaper type of finish on the player boards, which I think was, I don't know this for sure, I'm guessing might have something to do with trying to keep the pieces locked into place. That one, it has kind of this fun premium feel, but also, unlike, say, Terraforming Mars or a board like that where the pieces could slide around, this one, it's important to have pieces where they are, but they're going to be more gripped to this because it's a board with some amount of friction. So I don't know if that was part of the factor for why this was done. But it was something that was a lot of players that I've played with found odd. The painted miniatures that come in this game are a showstopper in a way, and we'll talk a little bit more depth when we get to the review about necessity of something like that. It certainly spiked the price of this by a decent clip. So I'm curious how that'll be received too. Gameplay-wise, this game has some really interesting moments from time to time. I'll give you an example. In my most recent play of this, Sean, I was playing as the Mystics. It's a civilization where you basically make predictions at the start of the game, And as soon as you get to the minimum edge of that prediction, so the predictions are things like, I'm going to reach the end of this many tracks, 2 tracks, 3 tracks, 4 tracks. I'm going to have 8 conquered territories. I'm going to have 5, 6, 7, whatever science cards. As soon as you hit the minimum amount of that prediction, in other words, if I predicted 5 science cards, as soon as I get my 5th science card, I immediately get a free wild resource, just as a little bonus. If I end the game with exactly that amount of whatever is in that category, that's 10 points. So potentially, if you predict everything right and play to that strategy, you'll get 40 bonus points at the end of the game, which is not insignificant. With that faction, I was high up on the science track. I advanced onto the science track onto a space that let me advance on the 2 other tracks, including the technology track. I advanced on the technology track, got the benefit from advancing on that technology track, which got me an advancement on one of my technology cards, which then got me another civilization, the Futurist, which advanced all of my markers 4 spaces on all the tracks, and triggered the bonus that got me another free wild resource, and ultimately 10 points at the end of the game. That was one turn. All I did effectively was pick this track, pay to advance, and then pick the card to move up. But there was a lot of stuff that stemmed from that. The thing I'm curious about are 2 things that have been nagging at me. One, at 4 and 5 players, when you're learning this game, it is a longer game than I tend to like. We're talking somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 3 hours. That's above typically what I'm going to find engaging and fun. And when you add in the fact that a player is going to get done so much earlier than another player in some cases, that's an interesting situation to run into. The other thing I'll mention is thematically, there are some of these cards, the Tapestry cards, I felt really interested in thematically. Oh, dictatorship. Oh, democracy. These make sense. These fit together. The some of the other elements of it, though, with the technologies, didn't click in a thematic way. The fun was there, but I certainly wasn't. There wasn't always this feeling of being invested in this one civilization and building things up. It was more a matter of, I need to get this resource to do this, and I need to advance here, and I need to do that. It was sometimes a little funny to point out, well, you've invented a space shuttle, but you haven't even invented farming yet. How is this possible? So there are moments like that in the game. But I'm curious. This game is hot, and I think it will be potentially a BGG darling. I think it'll certainly be in Game of the Year mentions just from the sheer amount of people who know about it. I'm interested to see how this one's received. I will say right off the bat, off of the 2 plays I've played so far, it didn't have that immediate spark that something like Scythe or Viticulture had for me. But it's certainly more in the category of good or great than it is anything lower than that. So those are some initial sweeping thoughts on Tapestry.
Did you win both games that you played of it?
I did not. I won the 5-player game and still had some conflicting thoughts. And I finished 4th out of 4 in the 4-player game. But that was the moment I just discussed, that crazy kind of combo chain moment that has stuck in my memory. That I finished 4th out of 4, but I was entertained at least by that chain of events that occurred. And there have been some interesting moments in each game.
I think that's why I didn't sparkle for you, because you didn't win all the games.
Oh, is that it? Because I didn't. Yeah.
You don't actually like Scythe. You just like that you always win at Scythe.
That's it. That's it for sure. No, Viticulture. I don't know if I've ever won a game of Viticulture. Maybe 1 or 2 in all the times I've played it. So that's not always a factor.
I'm just joking.
It certainly doesn't hurt, though, Sean. So in any case, that's Tapestry. I'm sure that's one you're excited to get to the table sooner rather than later, Sean.
Very much so. Yeah, I mean, as a Civ fan, but yeah, we'll talk a lot about it at some point and after I've played it.
Cool. Well, that's Tapestry. Over to you.
All right, last one I'll talk about is the Artemis project from Grand Gamers Guild, designed by Daryl Chow and Daniel Roque. This was a Kickstarter game that our buddy Matthew kickstarted. He did that because there were early comparisons to one of his favorite games. It might even be his absolute favorite game, which is Alien Frontiers, which is a fantastic dice placement game. And I like dice placement games. One of my favorites being Voyages Marco Polo. We talked about one last week in our, or the other week rather, in our Duke's Double Take, Rajas the Ganges. I like the mechanic, and so this has that. You are basically settlers of Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter, and you're doing stuff under the ice sheet and underwater, collecting energy and resources to build buildings on the surface. And ultimately, you're trying to score a bunch of points because, hey, it's a Euro game. So you have 5 dice to start with. Well, actually, that's all you ever have. 5 dice, period. They're regular D6s, 1 through 6. You also have one type of worker. I don't remember if they're workers or not, but one type of worker, this little tan worker, and there are other workers you can buy throughout the game, red ones and blue ones and purple ones, and they have certain special abilities, and you also need certain ones to man different types of buildings to give you bonuses throughout the game and also to give you some end-game scoring points. And the structure of the game is you're going to take turns placing out one die on one of the action spots around the board. So you can use the dice to bid. There are these expeditions you go on, and you're placing the dice there to bid for the first or the second goal, or not goal, but a reward for them. You're bidding on the buildings. The more you bid, the more it's going to cost you to actually purchase that building. But then you can also place them on resource spaces to get energy and I think it's minerals. And the more pips you have there, the more you're going to get from what's a finite pool each round of those resources. But the more pips you have, the later in the turn you're going to actually get to resolve those. So it could be that there's 10 energy in the pool right now, and I put my 6 out first, thinking, hey, I'm going to get 6. But then, Alex, you place a 4, which goes in front of my 6, and then someone else places a 2, and someone else places another 2. And now, I don't remember what the math is, but now I'm only going to get like 3 instead of the 6 that I had wanted. So that's an interesting little tension there. There's also spots to go get more workers, to upgrade workers. And then the buildings are one of the main ways that you're scoring some points at the end of the game, because you have them manned in particular ways, or I should say staffed in particular ways. And that gives you points, but also, like I said, some of them early on will give you additional resources throughout the game. This was okay. There was no spark here. If I was going to play a dice placement game, I would play Rajas of the Ganges before I would play this. Rajas was a little bit more interesting, and I wasn't particularly crazy about Rajas. But still, it has nothing on a game like Voyages of Marco Polo. Yeah, it was fine, but I think from the get-go, we could just kind of see that it was just another midweight Euro that just didn't have a big wow factor to it. Yeah. I don't know. You might like it.
Yeah, it's okay. Sounds forgettable.
Yeah, it could be. I'd rather play Alien Frontiers. So there you go. So that's Artemis Project. It's a thing. It's a game.
All right. Well, it is in fact a game. I played a game that is an old game by Dukes of Dice standards. Very, very old, in fact.
Older than you, in fact.
No, that's not true. Older than my time in the hobby, for sure. This is a game called Citadels. This game came out in the year 2000. Designed by Bruno Fedudi. And this was, I could best describe it for folks who don't know the game as, well, Gamer's Love Letter. It's a game where you will get a secret role. Sometime you'll draft them, basically. There's 8 cards. One of them gets removed. They range anywhere from I think the one was the assassin, can kill off another named player. You go up to the thief and the bishop, and all the way up to the warlord is, I think, the 8. But the cards go 1 to 8. You remove one of them secretly, and then everyone around the table drafts a card, and then you resolve them in order, 1 to 8, skipping the 2 cards or more that ended up getting removed. We played this at 6 players, so there were 2 roles that weren't used each round. Your ultimate objective in this game is to get enough building cards built out in front of you to win the game. Once 8 are built out, that triggers end game, and then you see who has the most points. The buildings sometimes will trigger off of other abilities. So, for instance, if you have the secret role of the bishop and play that on your turn, you'll get extra income if you have a certain type of building. Whereas if you're the king, you'll get income based off of a different type of building. There are other roles such as the magician, which lets you trade hands with another player. The warlord lets you burn down other people's buildings with a bit of a discount. The architect lets you draw more building cards. And the turn structure is fairly simple. You basically reveal your card, possibly doing its ability at that time or not, and then either take some gold or take a card, and then build a card or don't, and then it goes to the next person in order. What's interesting about this one is it's a game that has big elements of take that, right? You're outright eliminating players or stealing all their gold or swapping hands with them, but it's not targeted take that. You're not targeting a specific player a lot of the time. You're targeting a specific role. I'm going to assassinate the king, or I'm going to steal from the magician. And it might be the person, sitting to your right who is that role. It might absolutely not be. It might be no one was that role. And it's a game that still holds up, Sean. It's a game that still holds up on that front. I found once I understood the rules and what they did, thinking about who has what and what that might mean and how to go about stopping it, I found that all very interesting. And I'd say this is an oldie, but a goodie. Have you played this one before, Sean?
Yeah, it's been a long time, probably like 10 plus years. And I remember probably played it 2 or 3 times, somewhere in there. And yeah, I remember it being highly enjoyable.
Yeah, it still is. There's an expansion out there that adds different roles to kind of mix up the game if you'd like. But yeah, it's one I might ultimately seek out. It was a lot of fun to play the other night at game night. And the new hotness is fantastic, but there's still some good games out there from years past that you can just now discover and still have a lot of fun playing. So that's Citadel's. And that's what we played this week. Let's head on over to the news desk. All right, first up in news, a pair of game announcements for games either coming out later this year or early next year that caught my attention this week. The first is Fox in the Forest Duet. Now, I know what Sean's reaction to this immediately was. Fox in the Forest is already a 2-player game. What are you talking about? Well, in this case, it's talking about a cooperative 2-player game. The idea being you're supposed to work together to play tricks and move through the forest. I should go back and say Fox in the Forest, the core game, is a fantastic 2-player trick-taking game.
Excellent.
That works despite having that restriction of 2-player trick-taking game. A gorgeously illustrated game.
Oh, yeah.
And a game that plays fantastic. Abby loves this game. I love playing this game. I don't know how that's going to translate into a cooperative game, but I have all the faith in the world based on the original edition that it's going to be fun and engaging, and it's high on my list. This is coming out from Renegade Games. You can pre-order it on their site. It's due out sometime early next year. Sean, your thoughts on a cooperative Fox in the Forest?
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, I like the original game huge amount. It's a fantastic game. I love trick-taking games, and it's interesting because it's a good 2-player trick-taking game. So anything that kind of builds on that and creates different ways to play it, sure, absolutely, I'll give it a shot.
So that's one of the 2 games that caught my attention. The other one, Azul Summer Pavillion. And this game got so much buzz right off the bat, it very briefly bumped Tapestry from the top spot on the BGG hotness. Don't worry, Stonemaier fans. Tapestry's right back there on top as of today, based off of the pre-order coming out and thousands of copies being sold. But I digress. Azul Summer Pavillion is again, this has this Azul-style draft that's been used in the first 2 games. What you're going to do is you're going to be drafting pieces of stars instead of big, chunky tiles this time, and then you're going to build them onto your board. You'll get bonuses for surrounding pillars, statues, or windows. I believe you need a certain number of different ones of these tiles in order to build them onto your own board. So it's a pattern building, set collection type of game. Looks stunning, looks gorgeous, and this one is going to be out in time for the holidays. You can pre-order that from Plan B Games website. It looks great, and who knows if it's going to play great, but based off of the first 2, it's one that I'm likely to scoop up, if only because Abby, my girlfriend, also really loves that game too. Well, Sean, your thoughts on seeing this new Azul?
Well, let me ask you this. She loves Azul, but she's a little annoyed that Azul Sintra has the Azul title in it.
Yes, she was annoyed. Though I will say, when I shared the link for this with her, the reaction wasn't annoyed. The reaction was, ooh, that looks interesting. So she thought it looked gorgeous, and that's enough to get her attention right off the bat. I should note that for that reason, not alone, but a big part of the reason that she fell in love with Wingspan right off the bat was just she thinks it's a stunning-looking game. So that's one that she has frequently requested to play. It gets a heck yeah on the Abby scale. I don't know where this one's going to fall, but yeah.
It sounds like Abby, my girlfriend, is a flip-flopper, Alex.
Is a flip-flopper?
Pick a side, Abby.
She loves a good gripe. So she may still gripe about it being called Azul Summer Pavillion after it comes out, but that's not going to stop her from playing and enjoying it.
Okay.
So, yeah, there you go. 2 games that caught my attention with some announcements this week and things you can pre-order now should you feel so inclined. So finally, we always look at a Kickstarter. And this one was interesting because of its origins and also because of the degree to which it's been a hit. So this is a game called Moonrakers. Sean, have you heard of this game?
Yeah, I have. And I took another look at the Kickstarter for it just now.
Yeah. This is a first-time project from a company called IV Studios, which is an animation studio that works with Netflix and a number of these big companies. They're a commercial animation studio that has kind of encouraged their employees to pursue different projects, and one of those projects turns out to be Moonrakers. And if you look at the page, it shows that a professional animation firm did it, because the entire page is animated and looks stunning. The graphic design on this game looks really crisp, really clean. It's a deck building game that mixes temporary alliances, negotiation, and shipbuilding with traditional deck management. So some interesting factors in the mix here, Sean. And I, in hearing that description, I thought this looked right up your alley, and it looks great. But no, not so much. Not feeling it.
So what's consistent here? I think from what I can tell, and it's both the animation on the Kickstarter page, and it looks to be the case on the cards itself. It uses this effect where it's like this really grainy looking, almost like single tone computer images from like the 70s or 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I seeing that correctly?
No, I think that, yeah, we're kind of looks at times like a transmission being broken up.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of static in the air.
I could do without that.
Okay. I thought it looked cool.
Well, I like high fidelity in my audiovisual elements.
Understood. Got it. So it's done really well. They did a good job pre-marketing it. They had built a decent amount of buzz with a good-looking website, good-looking Instagram account. It's $55 for the base game and the graphic novel, talking about the story and the backstory of this game. $65 for the base game, graphic novel, and Kickstarter exclusive expansion. I believe it's a campaign, last I checked, and I may be wrong, that was running with no stretch goals, which is always interesting to see. Certainly hasn't slowed them down. They've made $153,000, more than tripling, close to quadrupling their 40K goal. Campaign runs through October 1st, 2019. Sean, something you're interested in? Doesn't sound like it.
No, not really. I mean, I'll play it. I like deck builders. It's hard for me to tell by looking at the page what sets this deck builder apart from other deck builders.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's the best Kickstarter page.
Okay. Interesting. So that's Moonrakers. To be clear on my end, I don't think I'm going to jump in. You're right in a sense. It's hard for me to tell exactly what's going to be super unique, but they do have the videos on there. Maybe I'll poke around further. 55 or 60. I mean, if you're going to go in, you're probably going to go in for 65. 65 is a big ask for an unknown quantity for me.
Yeah.
But it does look great, and I'm certainly willing to try it when it's more readily available. So that's Moonrakers, and that is a look at the news. Toptonia. Table share. I can't do it.
Oh, Alex, yeah. So,
well, I was trying to sing the national anthem of Game Topper Nation.
Yeah.
It didn't work too well, but we're gonna keep this ad going anyway.
So yeah, Alex, Game Topper Nation.
Yeah.
We've talked quite a bit about GameToppersLLC.com. You can like them and follow them on Facebook, but there's also Game Topper Nation, which you can join to basically show off your game toppers. Not only show them off, but look at other people's game toppers so you can see how fantastic these amazing toppers are for playing some of your favorite board games. Plus, Berkey, our buddy Berkey, uses it for polls. Like hey, we need new playmats. What would you guys like to see in terms of new playmats? And he throws them out there so you can help him figure out what everyone's gonna want to see on the latest new playmats. Alex, you are an honorary citizen of the Game Topper Nation because you have a Game Topper.
I do indeed. I just officially joined Game Topper Nation Facebook group and have been informed by Facebook that a passport is already on its way.
Oh, perfect.
I'm a dual citizen, Sean, of both the United States and of Game Topper Nation.
Well, if you could only keep one citizenship, Alex, which would that be?
It would be a close call. Because on one hand, you get to vote on fantastic polls on the future of Game Toppers, and the other, just all of the, citizenship benefits of being a United States citizen.
So head on over to Facebook to check out Game Topper Nation, and head on over to their website, GameToppersLLC.com.
La 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 roar. La 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 roar.
What, Alex?
Yes? Yes, Sean?
What are you doing?
I'm practicing my dragon scales. Dragon Scales from Arcane Wonders is a game designed by Richard Lanius. It just released at GenCon in Dragon Scales, which is not at all about singing and practicing scales where you roar at the end of them. You're playing a formidable villain. Your sinister conquests are innumerable, but there's one foe that even you cannot vanquish alone. Arcarex, the Lord of Dragons. A hoard of treasure beyond imagining waits to be claimed. The scales of this dragon are more valuable than any amount of gold or gems. Will your loose alliance be able to take down Arcarex? Or will this great dragon's rage consume you all? And that is Dragon Scales. Not at all about singing, Sean. Fun fact.
But I'm sure that, Alex, when you play it, you'll make it all about singing nonetheless.
Yep, I will find an opportunity to sing every single card. So this is a game you're going to want to play with me.
So even though this came out at Gen Con, we're looking for a general release in the middle of September. So be sure to check out your friendly local game store or your favorite online retailer to pick up a copy of Dragon Scales from Arcane Wonders.
It's never a blunder when you go with Arcane Wonders. This week, we're talking about a game that crushed Sean's dreams from one of Sean's favorite publishers. Are you a crook? Or are you trying to catch the crook? We're talking about Watergate.
So Watergate is one of the latest board games from Capstone Games, designed by Matthias Kramer. And this is an asymmetrical, card-driven game where one player is taking on the role of Richard Nixon, former president of the United States, and the other player is taking on the role of the editor. Not a named editor, just the editor, even though it's Bill Bradley, but that's fine. And you're winning in two different ways. As Nixon, you are winning if you survive until the end of your second term. And that's going to be done by collecting 5 momentum tokens throughout the different rounds of play. As the editor, you are winning if you are able to connect 2 of the informants to Nixon. And the way that you're going to do that is by connecting these informants. There are 7 of them that ring the outside of the player board, with Nixon in the center of a cork board. And so it kind of looks like your little conspiracy theory cork board where you have all these pins and red string going from one pin to the other. And there are all these spots for different evidence markers to go. And throughout the game, if you're able to place the informant face up on its matching spot, and then you're able to pin evidence to the board that connects an unbroken chain from informant to Nixon, and you do that with 2 of them, that's how the editor is going to win. Now, as far as the turn structure goes, both players are going to draw a hand of cards each round, either 4 or 5, depending on who has the initiative. The player with 5 has the initiative and will get to play a card first. Now, card play, you're either playing it for a point value, which is at the top of the card, or you're playing it for an effect, which is either an event that typically gets removed from the deck altogether, or there are some special ones for Nixon, the conspirators, which stick around when you use the event. And then for the editor, there are the journalists, which again can stick around even after you use it for the non-value portion of the card. And what you're trying to do with these is basically play tug of war with 5 elements on this research track. So there's a center, the 0 spot, and then there are 5 spots going towards Nixon and 5 spots going towards the editor. And the 5 elements are the initiative token, the momentum token, and then 3 face-down evidence tokens. Now, the evidence tokens come in 3+ varieties. Basically, there are 3 colors on the evidence board, blue, yellow, and green. And so your tokens will be at least one of those colors. Some of them are split. So you might have a yellow, blue, or a green, yellow, whatever. So those are placed face down. Nixon gets to know what those are. And then as the editor plays cards, I might say, okay, I'm going to play this particular card for its value. It's a 3 value, and it can affect either of the two tokens, the momentum token or the initiative token, or a specific color of evidence. And so they're all face down, and I say, okay, I'm going to try and affect a green evidence marker. Alex, you're Nixon. Do you have a face down green marker? And you say, go fish if you don't, or you say, yeah, I sure do, and you flip one of them over. If you have multiple, you don't have to flip them all, just one of them. Then I can move that however many spaces it indicates to me. If I ever get any of these various tokens to the 5 on one side or the other, that player scores it immediately. Or at the end of the round, once everyone has played their cards, you're going to award them based on whose side of the track they wound up on. So at the end of the round, if the initiative has changed, then you're going to flip that. It affects turn order and how many cards you draw. Again, the momentum gets awarded to Nixon, 5 of those, and Nixon wins. Or as the editor player, you can still collect the momentum tokens. It doesn't help you win, but once you hit the 3rd, 4th, and 5th momentum tokens, there are some special bonuses that you can get. But then the evidence awarding is pretty interesting. As the editor player, you're going to place them on a corresponding empty space of the right color on the board. Again, trying to make a connection, an unbroken chain between Nixon and one of the informants. As the Nixon player, if you get one of those, you get to place that on a corresponding color, but face down, it's blocking a connection, which is pretty cool. Now, I didn't talk too much about the events as you play them. Again, you're making this choice whether to play a card for the value or the event. Some of them will have multiple effects, like move a certain number of face-up evidence, 2 spaces, and then move the initiative token to 1 track. It might let you do random draws from the board. It might let you remove things, random draws from the bag of evidence tokens. Might help you remove things from the board or add things to the research track or remove things from the research track. Lots of different options you have there. But basically that is how you play Watergate. Alex, what were your initial expectations?
So anything from Capstone, I'm immediately going to be worried it might be a little bit too deep or not really in my wheelhouse. But when I saw the play length and when I saw the designer, I was decently optimistic that as a 2-player game, this could be a lot of fun. It had a theme I was really interested in. It again, have a fairly short play length. The game itself looked good and interesting. So from everything I'd seen, I was actually fairly interested in giving this one a try, despite the fact that, again, this is a publisher that's far more your tastes than mine typically. What about you, Sean, besides being in a complete furious rage? How are you feeling about this game before you actually tried it?
Well, you're right. It was a furious rage because I was working on this. I was working on a game similar to this, although a little different. And coming from a renowned game designer, from a publisher that I really like and respect, I was like, oh, well, what's the point? What's the point, Alex? So yeah, I still think I had decently high expectations, knowing that it's a theme that I really enjoy. I mean, obviously, I would have to enjoy this theme if I was going to go to the trouble of researching it a bunch and then designing a game around it. I'm glad it came out now and not like a year from now.
Okay.
But yeah, I know I had high expectations for this game. And then after I saw what gameplay was going to be like, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy this a decent amount.
Okay. Very good. A rule book. Sean, did you learn this one from the rules? How did you learn this game?
So I watched 2 videos. I watched Rodney's video on Watch It Played, and I also watched the Board Game Geek's video. And I was probably paying like 80% attention to them. And I got things wrong. They taught it fine. I went back and checked. They taught everything fine, but there were little things that I missed, and the rule book was kind of unclear. The rule book it spells everything out, but it spells it out in different areas, or like there's certain parts that are only in the attention section in the card description in the back of the rule book. if that makes sense. So there were some interesting things in the rule book that, like, so for example, anytime the Nixon player does anything, or actually anytime anybody does anything to move an evidence token, it gets flipped up. That wasn't readily clear in the section of the rule book about moving evidence tokens.
I missed that too.
Yeah.
I missed that part too.
So that was a little annoying. And that got played wrong the first couple plays.
Yeah, not just that, but a couple of other little things. For instance, I didn't realize that you had to have matching evidence when you're Nixon. You had to play it face down and match when you're placing the block. You have to place it somewhere that matches what's on that evidence token, which makes perfect sense. But it was just something that got missed, and I'm not sure how much of that was inattentiveness or how much of that is the structure of this rulebook could have been done a bit better.
I think it would have been kind of rough to learn just from the rulebook.
Yeah. So that's how I learned it, by the way. So BJ, Dr. Board Game, Dr. Gumbo, BJ and I learned this game at GenCon, and from the rules, from the rule book, and it was a little bit of a slog. It wasn't terrible, but there were definitely some things we messed up on initial play, and some things that took until, say, my third or fourth play to even get squared away completely. Which, again, some of those things you just straight up miss as a gamer, and it's going to happen. It's there plain as day. And sometimes you wish they would have highlighted things or organized them a little bit better. So, there's probably blame to go around on that one. So that's a rulebook. Components and art. Sean, what did you think of the look of this game, the feel of this game?
Yeah, I think it looked good. So you've got a square-ish board. I think it's square. That, again, looks like a cork board with a bunch of the red string, the network, linking all of the different pins together. And then you've got the track on the side of the board. I think it looked good. And I think it looked, they wanted to make it look like it was a product of the 70s. Right. So I think that looked good. A couple people that were watching plays or just commenting on it in our game group were like, "Oh, I don't think that looks very good." I'm like, "No, I think it's accomplishing what it's trying to accomplish here. I think it looks good. It's got all black and white photos, historic photos from of the people and events happening surrounding the Watergate scandal on the cards. The card size is a little bit weird. They're bigger cards, and so I think it's going to be harder to find sleeves. It's not your standard card size. But no, overall, I think art, graphic design was solid. Component quality was solid. Good quality cards. The evidence tokens are just your typical, board game shit. Nice drawstring bag to hold them, and then nice chunky red and white cylinders. White is the initiative token. Red cylinders are the momentum tokens. So I think it was pretty solid production and art.
I appreciated the touches, like having different photos of the moments that are being referenced, whether it's an event or an informant or whoever else. It certainly felt like it was that moment when you played the card because it showed that moment. And the graphic design was crisp, clean, and clear. That certainly didn't get in the way of playing the game or playing it well. I think it looked fine on the table, Sean. I could sort of get where people might be coming from in terms of it maybe looking a little bit drab or boring, but it's meant to be a duel between a newspaper and Richard Nixon in the 70s. This is not some high fantasy game or some sort of high tech or space. Like it's true to its theme, and I think the look fits that theme. So yeah, I had no issues with that from that standpoint at all. I don't think it was a big uplift for the game, but I certainly didn't hold it back in my eyes.
Yeah.
So, gameplay, Sean. This is where I was pretty sure after a couple of plays of this that I would probably like this game better than you would.
So, at its heart, it is a tug of war game because you have these 5 different tokens that you're pulling back and forth on these tracks, and it's also a little bit of, and not area control. That's the wrong choice of words, but it's route building in a sense. As the editor player, you're building routes. As the Nixon player, you're trying to block routes, and ultimately too, it's a card driven game, which is one of my favorite styles of game. So you have things like Twilight Struggle, which is one of my top 10 games, Paths of Glory, which is one of my top 10 games. A lot of war games use this card-driven method mechanic. There you go. That I really enjoy because there's this deck management aspect to it. So you have certain events that are really good. When do you use them? Because when you use them, they're gone from your deck. But also you have, one value cards that I don't want to keep drawing this one value card. So you can use it for an event, even if it's not particularly spicy for you at the moment, because it thins your deck of those bad cards. I like these card-driven games, and I like the tug of war. And then it feels like, it feels almost like there's you're building supply lines and trying to interrupt supply lines, like in a lot of war games. So this, in a lot of ways, felt like a very basic introduction to some of the more complex card-driven games, but I still think there's too much of a leap from Watergate to, say, Twilight Struggle. There needs to be something in between. But here's what I will say ultimately. This felt like much more of an abstract game than I would have wanted it to for this particular theme. Anytime you talk about a game with a theme that feels more abstract, you're kind of blending the gameplay discussion and the theme discussion. So I'll try and avoid that. But for the most part, it was a little bit too much of an abstract for my taste, given that it has a great theme.
I can just hear the bitterness spilling off of your tongue. It's just dripping off of you right now, Sean.
Okay. You don't think? I mean, it's a fairly abstract game.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
well, that's fine.
Yeah, I actually don't think so.
Let's see what the guild has to say, because I think there were people.
We're already going there. No. That's pretty quick.
Well, I'm just saying there were people in the guild that also thought it was fairly abstract. But hey, that's just the right ones.
Well, let's talk about it in terms of the gameplay itself. And the gameplay itself of this one, to me, was really satisfying. It's this tense tug of war. I can't let you get this momentum token right now, so I'm going to fight hard for that. But then that means you'll have initiative, which means you'll have more cards in future rounds, and you're getting really close on this informant, so I have to make sure to burn that informant, but that takes it out of my deck. And do I burn this event now, or do I just use it for its movement? Am I using these cards as the most efficient way I possibly can? Am I properly prepared for any sort of counterattack that someone else might have? Twilight Struggle to me was just too sweeping, and it was mistaught the first time I played it, and it wasn't ever something that attracted me. This one from the jump attracted me. From the jump, it was one that grabbed me, that kind of tension of the game. And I won't talk about theme, but for I got into it. It was something that that because that gameplay had that tense feel because of those hard decisions about which token to move, or whether to use this thing for its event or for the movement, how to manage your hand, how to play it in the best order. It was a perfect game for my tastes. It's quick, it's fast, and you get these really interesting decisions that come out of it. And it feels fun to play both sides of it. They felt reasonably balanced to me. Did both sides feel balanced to you, Sean?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think they're both fairly balanced. Yeah.
So that being said, I knew full well this, given your love for a Twilight Struggle and a game like 1960 Making of a President or those types of games, this is a Sean game through and through.
Sure.
And Watergate is lighter than that. It's a big step lighter than a lot of those games. But I think that's part of what makes it so great is it's reasonably accessible. I say that, by the way, going back to Abby, my girlfriend, yet again this episode, played that game with her, and boy, oh boy, did she hate it. Boy, oh boy, did she absolutely hate this game. It was one of those, she likes games where even on a first play against an experienced player, she can at least feel competitive. And with this one, she just never fundamentally understood the game. And as a result, it was just like getting ground into the dirt. It was sort of like when I played Jake Bach in Keyforge, and I took the good deck and gave him the bad deck. It was that kind of a feel to the game. So she will never play this game with me again, I don't think. Yeah. So that being said, at least from a gamer perspective, it is certainly accessible, and I think that's a positive point for it. But if you're a Sean type of gamer, someone who's played those heavier games like a Twilight Struggle, and you may find this one lacking for that reason.
Well, but again, that's the thing is I'm not comparing it to Twilight Struggle, right?
Sure.
Because I know that this is a lighter version of that, similar to 2008 Campaign Manager. Remember that? You played that, right?
Yeah, I do.
And I think this does a better job of 2008 Campaign Manager in terms of the gameplay. I think that 2008 Campaign Manager felt a lot more thematic to me, but I think I agree with you. I think the gameplay here is really good. I would just call it a really good abstract with a pasted on Watergate theme. I mean, this could be a war game. This could be, an alien invasion. This could be a historical war game. Because ultimately moving things on the research track is pretty abstract. And then creating these networks of linked tokens, that could be territory. That could be, important strategic, locations on a map. Like it felt pretty abstract. But I think it's good. I think it's a good abstract.
Well, it sounds like we're already jumping to theme.
Well,
so let's just talk about theme.
Don't get frustrated. I could hear in your voice. You're frustrated that I find it to be not as thematic as you.
You're messing with the format here. Well, that's more the frustration.
Well, no, but it's because I'm calling it an abstract. That's what I was saying before. It naturally kind of starts pulling from that thematic discussion. I'm trying to avoid it, but because I'm saying it's abstract and you're saying it's not, that's kind of what we're hammering out here.
Here's why it strikes me as thematic or feels thematic. It feels thematic in that you, as Richard Nixon, feel the pressure of the other player piling up evidence, this little piece, this little thread, pulling on this, making this connection. As Nixon, you're burning sources and paying people off, and you feel like you're playing dirty sometimes, especially with some of those cards. And as the journalist, you feel like you're digging hard for the facts. And I like how these cards a lot of times are rooted in history. They're tied to specific speeches or specific moments or concepts. And when those cards are played, it feels like that thing. It doesn't feel pasted onto me. I do feel the theme. I feel the momentum. Oh, Nixon just did this big underhanded thing and took all of the attention away, or just shut down this whole round altogether and kept everyone from focusing on this. Or on the journalist side of things, I just dug up this juicy piece of intel through Deep Throat. And as a result, I've gotten a bunch more evidence, or I've reset the tables, or I got that feeling for sure in this game. For instance, as the editor, when you win those momentum tokens, it's not how you win the game, but it's a good way of A, denying Nixon from doing so, but B, flipping evidence or forcing impeachment. And you can feel that mounting pressure of public opinion starting to turn when you're the editor and you're starting to both close in on evidence and win momentum. I was absolutely telling stories in a lot of cases with this game. So I can sort of get how it's abstract, right? The evidence isn't, well, this is financial and this is this. And yeah, certainly you only think of it as green evidence, yellow evidence, blue evidence. That part didn't necessarily connect with me thematically, but the rest of it did. The cards did, the momentum did, the how they were implemented did. And so there are certainly elements of this that are more abstracted than others, but I actually do feel it was a thematic game. I felt the tie to it, and I played it as such.
Yeah, and I mean, and I was, as I'm playing, I'm looking at the events, I'm connecting it to what I know about the history, I'm reading, the flavor text to myself. So it is what it is. And again, I'll reserve some when we talk about theme. I will say that
we're talking about this is theme. We're in the theme discussion.
I still have more gameplay stuff.
Oh my goodness. This is what happens when you mess with the format,
We had to, because we were having a little tiff about whether it's abstract or not.
All right, what else do you have on gameplay?
I would be more convinced by what you had to say about the experiential thematic factor of it if you had actually worked for Larry Barker when you were here in town. But you weren't.
I've done investigative reporting, Sean.
Not like Larry Barker and his team, Alex.
No, certainly not like I was never on special assignment, the OSA team. And I was never Larry Barker himself. I did not soar to those heights.
You couldn't grow the mustache. Wow, this is for all of the Albuquerque listeners.
This is really inside
they're
baseball.
They're enjoying that.
Yeah.
But okay, so here's one little gameplay.
I have a good Larry Barker story, by the way. Should I tell it here?
Is it about Nixon?
Nah, I don't think I should tell it. What's up?
It's about Nixon?
It's not about Nixon. It's about the it's about going with him to see Penn and Teller out at the Hollywood Casino.
Okay.
It was a weird experience.
Huh. That does sound like a weird experience. Wonderful mustache, though. Gameplay, something that actually is this theme? I don't know if it's theme or not. Maybe it is. You know what was weird to me? It was weird to me. Okay, in general, when you're a crazy conspiracy theorist and you're trying to link people together on a corkboard.
Sure.
What are you? And usually it's like the kingpin at the top, right? It's the mob boss at the top. Who are you linking to this person? You're linking the conspirators, right?
Sure.
Typically. But in this game, you're not linking the conspirators to Nixon. You're linking the informants to Nixon.
Well, sort of.
No, well,
you're taking information. You're taking information from the informants that ties to conspirators that ties to Nixon. That's how I thought about it.
I get it. Yeah, I get that's the argument, right? It just seemed weird. I want to connect Chuck Colson and his deeds to Nixon. Not so much the informants. Like, it put too much focus on the informants. The informants should have been the actions that you're taking that do stuff. Instead, you're playing cards that recruit them as an informant for the journalists or secures the support of them as Nixon, right? They were the trophies that you're fighting over. They weren't necessarily the things that were affecting the investigation. That was a little...
So salty. So much bitterness.
I could have opinions. It's fine.
Sean, open your heart. Open your heart. It's okay. Sometimes in life you just get beat. Okay? You know, sometimes you lose the race, you get the silver medal. It just happens sometimes, Sean. It's okay.
Listen, if anything, my Capstone fanboyness is now canceling out my Watergate saltiness. Right?
I don't think so. In this case, I don't think so.
Okay, great. But no, I mean, at its heart, my game was going to be much more complex. Like Twilight Struggle level in terms of complexity and length of time.
You could still do it, Sean. You could call it Watergate 2.
No, I'll just call it the Watergate game.
The Watergate.
And people are like, oh, I can either get this Watergate game designed by Matthias Kramer or this Sean Ramirez loser. Which one should I buy?
You could start off Stone Cap games. See how that goes over.
Okay, I don't know what that means, but that's fine.
Instead of Capstone, Stone Cap.
Stone Cap. Okay, well, I was thinking like...
Come on.
I thought it was something to do with like Stonemaier too when I was...
No!
Ugh. So...
Disgusted with you.
I'm not really that annoyed by it. Like, if I wanted to design my game, I still could.
I have known you for 5+ years. You are clearly annoyed. I think closer to 6 years, actually. You're annoyed. It's okay.
I think closer to 7 years.
Could be closer to 7. Yeah, that sounds right. Anyway, you're annoyed.
I'm slightly annoyed, but not so much so that it's affecting how I think of this game.
It's affecting how you think of this game. It's okay.
Oh my goodness. All right.
It's all right. We all have our weaknesses. Did you want to talk more about theme? Because you certainly already basically said you didn't think it was thematic.
In support of my view that it's an abstract. So,
okay.
No, but look, I agree with you. There is great tension in the game. There are great moments when you have just the right card to just inch some of the tokens over to your side, or Nixon plays a card that like has an effect and then immediately ends the round. The counter spells, there are counter spells in the game. Like, I agree with you. It is a good game. It's just a little more abstract in my opinion. Going to theme, as far as theme goes, I don't know. I guess I've said it all on theme. It's, yes, there are thematic tie-ins to the game. It just doesn't feel super thematic to me. You know, one of the cards that's very thematic is Gambit. Gambit is a card that, what does Gambit do? I can't remember what it does, but it's some really cool effect. Is that the one that lets you immediately move the momentum token to the 5?
I think so.
Capture it. So typically event cards they give you an effect and then you remove them from the game and they're done. Gambit, however, has an alternate mode. It can either remove itself or you can choose another card from your hand, one of the 3 conspirators, and remove that instead. In other words, you're sacrificing the conspirator. They're taking one for the team so that Nixon can have this power play. That's kind of thematic. I mean, I'm not saying it's athematic. I'm just saying it's not as thematic as I would have wanted for a Watergate game. There is a good amount of that. So I will correct myself to say it is not a pure abstract game like chess or Devon or any of the Czar or any of those games. Like there are thematic elements to it, and I'm being a little unfair just for hyperbolic effect, Alex. But it is not.
All right.
It is not as thematic as I would like it to be for a theme that I am as passionate about.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
Is that okay? Are we
Sure,
still friends now?
It wouldn't have mattered what you said there. We're still.
Oh, I was ready to walk away from this friendship.
Were you? Wow. All right, let's go to the Guild. Guild had some thoughts on this game. Adam Dalton says, Watergate is awesome. My game of the con at GenCon. Really love the tug-of-war aspect of the game and how there are multiple tug-of-wars occurring at once. You want to be making connections to Nixon, but you also got to watch the momentum. But initiative is so important. Just this morning, I used it to teach my 14-year-old nephew about the scandal, and we played 2 games. I'd recommend anyone who likes 1960 Making of the President try this game out ASAP. 6 out of 6 on the Ducal scale, which is 1 more than it was just last week.
And then Jimmy DM90 said, played Watergate today. It was solid. Though the cards made a certain amount of thematic sense, the game felt pretty abstract to me. Nothing about it really blew me away. I'd give it a 3 on the Ducal scale. And by the way, we rate things on a 6-point scale. A 3 is game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation.
Now I will say this, Sean. You had discussed earlier, so the Guild seems to say that it's pretty abstract. I see one comment because DJ from Board Game Gumbo says, I played Watergate with Alex at GenCon and got crushed by Nixon and his cronies. I've played it 4 more times since then, and it gets better and better with each play. Watergate is a tightrope battle with 2 players jostling over the evidence needed to pin the scandal on the president. Even when momentum seems in your favor, you always feel just 1 card or 1 play away from winning or losing. It's getting to be even more fun, as these type of games do, as we play the game more, because we're learning the cards in the deck as we go. I get that for some it will be an abstract, but the card play is very thematic to me. The sweaty palms and sneaky looks pace of play and awesome production make Watergate the best game to come out of Gen Con that I've played so far, although medium is close. And I will say this, it was certainly close to Game of the Con for me. It was between that, Trogdor, which I've played many, many more times after and loved, and Medium, which I've played many more times afterwards and also loved. So 3 really solid games out of Gen Con this year. Hard to pick. Sean, final thoughts and rating?
So it's a good game, Alex. And so I don't want to take away from that. There were really tense moments at the end of every game. Every game of this I played, it feels like the win comes in different ways. Sometimes you're pulling something out of the bag and it's that right piece of evidence you need that just goes into spot, and the Nixon player didn't see it coming because Nixon sees what's on the resource track and knows, the editor needs a yellow card to play and there's no yellow evidence on the board. Cool, I'm safe, right? So there are surprises that come at you from some of these cards. And then other times, things are on the ropes for the editor player. I played one game with Jared where I had one of the informants secured, and I needed to desperately get the Deep Throat card, which lets me flip one of the secured informants, or not flip it, but remove it. And then I have to wait to be able to play the card to bring that informant out. And through tense gameplay, I got the Deep Throat card, and then he was going to counterspell me, but I had a counterspell for his counterspell. It worked out great. Yeah, nice. It worked out great. Although, again, there was some confusion over whether you could counterspell a counterspell because of the use of the term action and reaction. Turns out you can. A reaction is a subtype of action. We didn't think it would work that way at first, but it does. So yeah, I think this is solid, and I enjoyed seeing the cards, seeing the major players. You've got your for the journalists, you got your Woodward and your Bernstein and your Ben Bradley. I think I said Bill Bradley earlier. Ben Bradley. Again, this is a theme that I love, and so I think the theme is going to bring me back to this game. I think the gameplay is good, But again, it's not as thematic an experience as I would want for a game about Watergate. I'm going to give this a probational 4.
Probational?
A probational 4. A good game worth playing just not all the time belongs in the duchy. I'm very curious to see how often I'm going to play this as a 2-player dual style game, asymmetric game. I don't know. I do like the theme, but it's not satiating my, recreate Watergate. I don't feel like this is not a simulation of Watergate, right? It doesn't rise to that level for me, which is something that, to be fair, my game wouldn't have necessarily done. My game was more about legacies. I can talk about my game, Alex. Get out of here. My game was about Nixon's legacy. And so Watergate was the focus of it, but there were aspects of foreign policy and domestic policy, relationships with the Congress. Anyway, my game is a simulation. This game is not a simulation of Watergate, which it doesn't need to be.
So that would be a probational 4.
Probational 4, the lowest rating I've ever given a Capstone game.
So I am higher on this game than you are, Sean, and I think we kind of knew this going into the review. It's my perfect time length for a game. It's a tense game. I like this 2-player interesting card play. The order of the cards matters. You have to make tactical decisions on the fly. There's a lot of things to consider. It's a tug of war. It feels thematic to me. And really, this had an outside shot at a low 6. But the problem is, I don't know how often I'm going to actually play it, because the other person I play most of my 2-player games with does not care for it at all. So Abby, for the most part, is the one who drags this down to a 5. But I don't have a lot of negative things to say about the game. It's other than kind of some slight issues with the rulebook. It's a tense, exciting, quick game that captures the flavor of Watergate in a beautiful way. And I know why. I can see why it was hot, because it does a lot of really cool things with the big time theme. So I think it lives up to the hype. But Sean, I get the bitterness. I understand. It's okay. Anyway, well, that'll do it for Watergate. Sean gives this one a probational 4. I give this one a 5.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, this week for our Dukes Quadruple Take, we're looking back at episode 183, Dorn Force, where we reviewed both Montana from Big Kid Games and Istanbul, the dice game. So let's start with Montana. I said this was a perfect 3. Too short for what it wants to be, too much setup for too little gameplay. You simply said you didn't ever see yourself playing this again, but didn't think it was bad enough that it warranted a 2. Sean, have you played Montana since?
No, and I barely remember it. I mean, barely. It was like, you're doing different things to collect resources, and then you're buying different plots of land with those resources. It took forever to set up, And I think I'm gonna knock it down to a 2, because I don't want to play it.
Wow.
Game has some merit, but has significant issues. And I think it's that setup. It's, it feels like it takes longer to set up than it does to play. That's not true, but that's how it feels. And there's just no spark. There's nothing memorable to it. Again, there's tons of games that I don't play in the intervening year, but I still remember them. And I still, but this one, I could barely tell you anything about it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I have a hard time knocking it down a peg further, but I will tell you, I haven't thought about this game, and in refreshing my memory, the main thing that comes to mind is the spinner. I remember the spinner, and I remember the quality of components was really high with this game, at least with the edition I had. And beyond that, I remember it was a race game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember a ton else, and that's not a great sign for the game. It may realistically be a 2, but I guess I'm going to call it a low 3 still. I don't know. I certainly haven't heard a lot of other gamers talking about it either, so I certainly don't think it's one that's had staying power.
So you would play this game again?
If it's set up on the table, I don't have to do that brutal setup, and it's just a matter of sitting down and kind of refreshing my memory. Yeah, sure, I would play it again. But it's the situation takes a lot to come up. It takes a lot to come up with the right situation where I would play this game. So maybe enough so for me to keep me from dropping it, but
sure,
not by much.
So let's see what the guild had to say about Montana. Oh, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
All right. Well, cool. Let's move on to Istanbul, the dice game. Sean, you gave this one a high 4. You said it's a much better the dice game than most. And he says, recommended giving it a try whether you liked Istanbul or not. I also gave this one a high 4. I said I had a hard time calling this a great game, but a 4 feels too low. Satisfying race game, doesn't overstay its welcome. And, quote, it leaves a nice taste in my mouth. We were on the exact same page with both of these games at the time. Sean, have you played Istanbul, the dice game, since?
Yeah, I have not. And, listening back to the review, I remember really enjoying this. And I would certainly play this again. I said it, in fact, I'm curious to see how much this is going to come out over the next year, because it's kind of a nice gateway game. Istanbul was the very first game we reviewed, episode 1 of the Dukes of Dice, that I haven't been crazy about over time. I enjoyed Istanbul, the dice game, more than I enjoyed Istanbul. And it was enjoyable. I mean, you're basically rolling dice to collect different types of resources, which you're using to go collect rubies, and a certain number of rubies wins. There's some cool combos. There's a little bit of light engine building. Like, it's a really solid game. It is always problematic when I don't play it in the year since.
Right.
But I'm hesitant to drop it to a 3. So right now it's at a 4. Good game. Worth playing, just not all the time belongs. The Duchy 3 game is okay. Not exciting. Will play in the right situation. This, I think I had said this fares pretty favorably among the dice games, the dice games. I'm going to keep it at a 4 for now. And maybe I'll find an occasion to bring it out in the next couple months.
Okay. I've certainly soured on it a bit too, if only because, again, for the same reason, I haven't played it, haven't thought about it, haven't suggested it. It just hasn't been a thing. And I've enjoyed the plays. I think it does what it does really well, but that's not a great sign for it if it's something that hasn't even come into mind as a suggestion over the year. So I think gameplay-wise, it's a 4. Realistically, it might actually be a 3, so it's somewhere in that kind of hazy gray area. Because it was a high 4 before, I think I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say it's probably actually a 4, but that's never a good sign, Sean. But I don't know. It feels like so many things just get lost in the shuffle these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like double takes are pretty much us just saying, yeah, I haven't played this in the year since. Yeah, I haven't played this one. Yeah, I haven't played this one. And maybe that's as good a sign as any, but I remember liking this game, and it's odd to me that it hasn't even come to mind in the year since.
Well, here's what I would say. If I gave a game a 5 or a 6, and I haven't played it in the last year, that's a little concerning.
Sure.
If it's a 4, meh, because for the most part, I want to spend most of my time playing 5s and 6s, playing new games for the podcast, and then if I have the choice, playing 5s and 6s. Why would I want to go back to a 4 when there are a ton of 5s and 6s out there?
Sure. So Gil did have some thoughts on this one, Sean.
Yes.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, we still break out Istanbul, the dice game, on occasion. It's a great game for introducing the hobby to new gamers because it looks visually appealing on the table and has some depth to it, but not so much to overwhelm newcomers to the hobby. I still have yet to play the original game, though.
Well, BJ, I think Istanbul's worth trying, but like I said, I think for my money, I prefer the dice game over the original game. That's just me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I do recall this kind of debate between Istanbul and Concordia back in the early days of my gaming hobby career, and siding on Team Istanbul, if only because Concordia didn't catch my attention. But Concordia certainly had more staying power than Istanbul, it felt like, by a good amount.
Absolutely.
So there you go. That's our Duke's quadruple take. Montana staying at a 3 for me, dropping all the way down to a 2 for Sean, and Istanbul staying at 4s for both of us, but some more cautious 4s than the last time around. And that will just about do it, except before we go, the rest of the top 6 episode names. Let's start with Jordan Hopper, who came with Spy, Die, and Big Sky. Spy referring to kind of the cloak and dagger shenanigans of the Watergate scandal. Die referring to Istanbul Dice Game, and Big Sky referring to Montana.
And then D. Shannon suggested Sean was going to name this episode, but someone beat him to it.
Love it.
I like it. That's a good one.
I like it. BJ with the suggestion Big Skies and Big Lies. That was my favorite, but you weren't a fan of that one for some reason, Sean.
My specific phrase was, let's not give Montana any more attention than it deserves.
Wow. Well, sorry, Dr. Gumbo, I fought for you, but wasn't to be.
And then Steve O'Rourke, the name father, suggested Follow the Rubies, which I think that was really my runner-up because there's Follow the Money from Watergate, and we're talking about rubies from Istanbul. So I think that was a great one.
And finally, Blaine Miley with You Spin Me Right Round, Ruby, right round. Spin referencing Watergate, the spin of that kind of a scandal, and Ruby, again referencing Istanbul.
Hey, and maybe the spinner from Montana.
Oh, that does make sense. Oh, man. That was a really clever name, Blaine.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Man, half of that went over my head. Oh, well. So yeah, that's gonna do it. I guess as by the time folks hear this episode, I am officially on the job hunt. So if you're in St. Louis and know of someone who's hiring and wants to hire a very charismatic podcast host, you know where to find me.
I can get you a job as a legal assistant, Alex. I know a firm.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just have to come out to here, and I get to boss you around all the time.
Oh no. I said in St. Louis. I made it very clear that was a requirement.
Hey, if the money's right?
How much are you paying?
I'll pay what you're worth.
I don't think I'm going to like that answer for some reason.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 208. Again, thanks to Jimmy DM90 for this episode title, I Am Not a Turk. Not a Turk, Alex.
You're not, actually.
Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on September 5th, 2019. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Arcane Wonders and Game Toppers, LLC. You can find all of Arcane Wonders' fine games at ArcaneWonders.com and learn more about Game Toppers at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!